Today in the Valley with Ibrahim Sanya is an African-American businessman who has been mentored by the likes of the late Harry Belafonte as well as the Black Godfather Clarence Avant. He began his career organizing events bringing together Black cultures from across the globe, producing shows and events with the likes of Stevie Wonder, the Fugees, and Herbie Hancock. He then joined BET as the president of event production, overseeing the production of multiple festivals and award shows. After the sale of BET to Viacom, he followed the path of Bob Johnson and ventured in the world of sports ownership. He is now part of the ownership groups of several sports franchises, including the MLB's Washington National, the World Team Tennis League's Washington Castles, the National Women's Soccer League's Washington Spirits, and the Cape Town Tigers of the Basketball Africa League. Today, the Valley welcomes Silverbacks Holdings Advisory Board member Paxton Baker.
It's not every day that one gets a chance to just hang out with a legend. First, just grateful to have you here, brother. It's a blessing always to see you, and it is lovely in New York City. I'm gonna take you back for a second to 1988. Remember, there was a company you incorporated called PKB Arts. Tell us about PKB and what was going on in your mind at that time.
So that was early on. That was not long after college. I went to Temple University and was there from 84 to 87, and lived in Atlanta for about a little less than a year right after Temple, and then I moved to Miami and I worked with the actor Philip Michael Thomas for about the last year and a half of Miami Vice, and Philip was insistent that I incorporate a company and start becoming an entrepreneur. He would hear nothing else behind it. So I would go out to the set. I was general manager at a theater called the Miami Way Theater, and I would go out to the set at different point and visit him on the set. And the Vice sets were always really cool and fly and a lot of fun. And he would ask me periodically, "Have you incorporated the company yet? Have you incorporated the company?" He said, "Listen, I'm giving you my accountant. I'm giving you my attorney. You gotta do this." So one time I went out to the set. He said, "Have you incorporated yet?" I said, "No, I'm not around to it yet." He said, "All right, well, don't come up to the set anymore until you incorporate your business." So I had always been entrepreneurially minded. I started producing concerts in college at Temple University around 84, 85. And so I worked with the city of Atlanta for their jazz festival, and then was at Miami doing jazz concerts at Phillips Theater. We had the great Sun Ra come down there, Sonny Forsh, and them other jazz legends. So that got me into it. And one day, one of the guests who was on the Convention and Visitors Bureau came through for one of the concerts and asked me if I was open to me. The tourist board folks in Aruba, and they had a festival which was going into a third year called the Aruba Jazz and Latin Music Festival. Ended up going out to Miami. Long story short, I got the contract in 89 to produce the 90 to 92 Aruba Jazz Festivals, and then started a festival in St. Lucia in 92, which I ended up producing for about 24 years. That kind of really formally got me on the path. And Trinidad Pan Jazz Festival, Barbados Painted Jazz Festival, Cayman Islands, Turks and Caicos, Anguilla, toured the Fugees, toured Gloria Estefan, toured Wynton Marsalis, toured Santana, Herbie Hancock, all throughout the Caribbean. Wow. And that kind of got me. And then I started my relationship with Black Entertainment Television as well. In 91, they came down and shot the Aruba Festival. And then next year, kind of really formalized with the St. Lucia Jazz Festival. And then we started a show called Caribbean Rhythms, which shot across the islands.
I remember.
And that was the first show of its kind that was broadcast weekly in the U.S. on cable of Caribbean content being on. And that was a really special time in life, and got off to change my whole life and kind of really opened up a lot of doors and really started to grow from there. And I ended up joining BET as an executive in the beginning of 99, and had a long run, both at Black Entertainment Television and Viacom, which purchased it. And I sold my production company to Bob Johnson as well the year prior to BET being bought by Viacom.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank
but
you.
I'm not going to leave you off the hook. You need to give us the nuggets behind that transaction. How does that come about? And what were the overall terms? Because, for every entrepreneur, effectively the chance to give birth to a business and sell it or doing an IPO is similar to the actor that gets his movie on the big screen. So what is that path?
In my opinion, the core of any really successful transaction that happens is always relationships and being able to find like-minded partners who have a passion, as you do, for a event, production, a venture. And I had gotten to know Bob in 91, actually 92, when he came down to St. Lucia when we started the festival. And he came down for about 3 or 4 years in a row to the festival. And Bob at the time was certainly one of the top entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs, period, but certainly African-American entrepreneurs in the United States or the world, if you will. And I built my relationship with him, ended up pitching him the show, Caribbean Rhythms, along with a guy named Alan Chastanet, who was then director of tourism in St. Lucia, and then ended up becoming Minister of Tourism and Prime Minister of the country for a number of years. So we pitched the show, ended up marrying the host of the show, Rachel.
That question was going to come.
Right. So that's been truly one of the greatest blessings of my life. And 3 children later, blessed beyond words there. So, but as far as the venture itself, Bob got to know me, I got to know him. At the time, I was producing about 3 festivals. It was Aruba, St. Lucia, and Trinidad. At the time, I think we were doing about 3 festivals when I met Bob. And just both kind of had a nice attraction. He thought that I was a solid young entrepreneur on the way up. He had a very solid love for jazz music and live music overall. And BET was, at the time, BET was the only Black brand on there was Black radio, but there was no Black television other than BET at the time. Now there's a number of offerings. So as far as the deal itself, I was in my 30s at the time, and was learning a lot about kind of broader business and not just purely bootstrap entrepreneurialism. And when Bob first offered me the opportunity to buy my business, he made a cash offer, and I actually turned it down and said, I've got more than that saved, thankfully, which taught me a lot early on. My guru, by the way, is Napoleon Hill, who wrote the book Think and Grow Rich, and I started reading that at 17 years old, and that really changed my life. So one of the principles of it is savings. And fortunately, I had saved up a pretty good chunk of money as a young person. And when he made me the initial offer, I passed on it. We kept talking. The friendship was there. And then he came back and offered me, when I joined the Jazz Channel as the general manager, a year later, he came back and offered me twice as much cash and stock options. And I didn't really know what stock options were at the time. And I was like, well, can I sell them or you use them? He's like, no, not right now, because the company's private, but I assure you they're worth a lot. So a year later, Viacom purchased BET.
Wow.
And I really found out what stock options were at the time, and it ended up kind of becoming a game changer in my life. And that was my life before the BET purchase by Viacom, and my life after that. So that turned a corner for me and really fulfilled a number of goals that were really important to me that I was in the process of building, and it was a game changer for me.
That's phenomenal. Now, I do notice some point of similarities between you and your friend Bob, because when that deal happened, the next thing he did to go buy a basketball team, which he eventually sold again to Michael Jordan. Somehow he's just finding some good entry point and exit point. And you, strangely enough, went from entertainment, music, and then sports. So how does a common thread come about?
Actually, it's all entertainment to some
Correct.
degree. Like, I mean,
Correct.
athletes, the greatest athletes have become pretty phenomenal entertainers as well.
Correct.
And also have a solid, the original person to me who crossed over was Muhammad Ali, who actually recorded a lot of poetry and did music as well and did acting. So as a kid, that was my ultimate hero, was Muhammad
Wow.
Ali.
Wow.
So, and then I developed friendships with, to me, great entrepreneurs in their own right who did it all. So Harry Belafonte has been a father to me and a mentor to me since 92. And the other person was Clarence Avant, who's referred to as a Black Godfather. And I met Clarence in 91. Clarence in 91, Harry in 92, and Bob Johnson in 92. So 3 great entrepreneurs in their own right and towering figures to me in American history and certainly African American history. So I met all of them as a young person, and all of them played a very significant role in my life.
What a blessing. And in sport, obviously, they say every time you emulate, sometimes you get a chance to do something even greater. So obviously, Bob seemed to have limited himself to basketball. You seem to have developed a voluptuous appetite. So now tell us about your little sport empire, because, you know, you see these rings. I mean, these rings are just
kind of run across them.
I'm seeing 2 massive rings. Tell us the story about the rings.
So actually, I didn't bring the third today, but I actually have a third. My first foray into sports was an opportunity, and an often asked question was how I got into baseball, which was my first entry point, which is in 2006. And my dentist, Dr. Ronnie Rosenberg, introduced me to the Lerner family. So I tell people, relationships are everything. Always be nice to your dentist. Not only is it in your mouth, but it could end up becoming a part of your life as well. So I met Dr. Rosenberg, who did my teeth, and he introduced me to the Lerner family. And that's how I got into the relationship with the Lerner family, which ended up, eventually we were successful in purchasing the Washington Nationals Baseball Club from Major League Baseball.
2006, that's like a full 17 years ago. You know,
Yeah.
everybody's talking about Black ownerships of teams today.
Mm-hmm.
People are trying to break that ceiling today. Like almost 2 decades ago, you and a few, and Bob, were already in that territory.
Mm-hmm.
How did it feel at that time?
It was a historic opportunity and one that I will treasure. I'm sure you can relate to this from the perspective of something that comes along in your life that almost seems too good to be true and almost unreal, and you're careful on how much you wish for it because you might spook it a little bit, and turn it to kind of something that. So we started the process in early 2006, and were successful in completing the transition in May. Is when the announcement was made for us that our group was the winning team, if you will. And throughout that whole time frame, it was just kind of literally pins and needles, and you're hoping so much, but you're trying not to hope or wish too much for it because you don't want to blow it. But there was it was one of the most amazing experiences in my life to be able to be a part of that. And then when we purchased the team, it was the Montreal Expos, who had been kind of a perennial doormat. And so part of what the Lerner family and Stan Kasten, who's now president, part owner of the Dodgers, pushed from the beginning was building a winning culture. So we purchased the team in 2006. We won the 2012 and 2013 National League East. And then we came back and won the National League East again in 16 and 17. And then in 18, didn't make the playoffs. And then in 18, we became the wild card team. And that was enough to kind of really get us all the way through to win the World Series. And it was interesting in
Which
that.
year?
What's that?
Which year?
2019. 2019. In 2015, there's a businessman in Washington called Mark Ian, who gave me the opportunity to join with him with the Washington Castles, which is World Team Tennis. and we won the sixth championship. It was the fifth in a row they won 5 of 6 championships over a 6-year span of time,
Wow.
or 7-year span of time. And I was there for the last championship in 2015, and that was my first Jostens ring, which Jostens makes the NBA championship rings, most of the NCAA rings, and make the Super Bowl rings and the MLB World Series rings. So that was my first taste, was in 2015, to be a part of an ownership group that won a championship. And I was already a part of the Lerner family and our group that had the baseball team. But 2015 was my first championship ring. So I got a taste of championships in 2015. Then in 2019, we won the World Series. Yeah, and then in 2020, a businessman named Steve Baldwin in the Metro DC area approached me about the opportunity to join the ownership group for the Washington Spirit, which is the National Women's Soccer League. And I joined in 2020. In 2021, we won the National Women's Soccer League championship, and that was my third ring of the bunch. So odd years are my great years. Anybody out there, you included, available in an odd year. This may be the ring for the Cape Town Tigers. So
Exactly.
yeah, odd years have been my fortunate years for it. So relationships are, I mentioned a little bit earlier, as far as like the key for me on things. And like I think good people attract each other.
Absolutely.
And
good energy.
Good energy attracts good energy. And I've been fortunate enough to be a part of good people and building good relationships. And I like to think that that winning culture spirit that I certainly have been gifted with it from being around people, learning from people who build championships. And that's been part of the success and fortune of my life.
That's remarkable. All I told my business partners when we had the great honor to welcome you in the ownership group was the great thing about Paxton. Not only is smart, connected, but he has an infection. He just wins. So let's get him in. He's going to give us a ring. So we are welcoming this condition you have. We don't know which year, but you just need to diffuse it in Cape Town Tigers. So we're really, really happy to have you in the Cape Town Tigers, which now is basically what, your 4th or 5th sports team?
It will be my 4th.
The 4th sports team.
Yeah, 4th sports team.
This episode is powered by Afroballers. Afroballers is the largest digital platform curating stories of African athletes, creating value in sports industry on and off the courts. Afroballers collaborate frequently with major sports league and with major sport personalities of African descent. It services an audience of over 100,000 of followers. We at Silverbacks Valley are big fans.
It's beautiful to see people take this passion that a lot of us have and try it on the business side, like you have done so in such a spectacular fashion. And you will observe that now institutions, not individuals like you and I, are basically coming from the massive private equity industry and allocating billions of dollars in it. Now, I'm sure you've been seeing the frenzy. You've seen the valuations increase. Obviously, you've been on the nice side of the receiving end of this.
Yeah.
What do you think triggers the steroids?
It's
right?
live. It's live. And it's live. And much like, so sports are live, they're in their moment. The other thing that on television that comes close to it would be like award shows, like on something happening in that very same moment that happens, that grist of something special. And if you've missed it, you can't wait to kind of go back and try to see if you see it. But if you actually are there or you're watching it live, it gives you something special to talk about the next day. And you were watching that game, right, while it was actually happening. And you can talk about it real time, and it feels like it's something, a special little gem that you possess yourself.
That others don't.
Right, and others don't because they weren't there. And so television is one thing. It's certainly, it's coming to its own and blossoming as to how many different camera angles that you get on something. But if you were there in person, it's like, you actually own that moment, and it's something overwhelmingly special. When you have like, Kobe's last game of the season, or like those special moments in championships, think about the scalping that goes on ticket prices, like something that's on the face value maybe $300 or $400, but that thing is going for $3,000 to $10,000, or sometimes even higher. Like if you got courtside, you can pay $100,000 for a ticket. So being on the ownership side of that is like nothing short of miraculous. Like when I was in Houston, when we won Game 7 of the World Series, it felt like your heart was just sort of just kind of like pound. It felt so overwhelmingly special. There are those moments in life, like your children being born or something like that, where it's just, they're so overwhelmingly special that you will cherish that exact moment for the rest of your life. I think sports gives you that opportunity, and ownership even more, because it's like, you help put that winning group together on the field. You help bring that fabric together. And in my opinion, the successful owners imbue a spirit of not just the people that are on the court, but the ownership team and the ownership group, where they're thinking about the venue, the employees that are inside the venue, the spirit of what it is. And as a consumer, you can feel that inside of an organization if the organization gets that right, that special formula, that little extra elixir that other people don't have. I think that a winning organization is not just what's on the floor, but it's the whole organization and everybody kind of buying into that. That's the magic elixir to me on a championship organization. And I believe we had that in Washington.
And what makes you select or accept an invitation beyond the relationship component? Because I'm sure that you've received, and you continue to receive invitation. You've become a name, a brand in that segment. So what would you say are criteria that tells you, I think I'm going to do this one and not this one? Is there a set of things you run away from? And is there a set of things you run towards?
Yes. So the one would be the market opportunity, the location of the city where the team is. That's certainly one of them. And the opportunity for the team itself to grow, as you do when you talk about portfolio opportunities. If you look at investments, you look at if something is kind of trading or at a high, and what the room is to grow it on the other side of it. So if you can purchase, one of Bob Johnson's old adages was buy low and sell high, something that fundamental. The relationship part to me, though, is crucial. On if you're buying into a group, you're buying the group of people, you're buying into that group of people, and you have to believe in their like-minded vision and ask, like, do I kind of get along with it? One of the things we didn't talk about that I'm an investor in as well is art and also memorabilia. And for me, I started, Harry Belafonte actually really got me into it. I kind of started it, but when I went over to Harry's house in '92 and really saw all the memorabilia that he had, which is just an incredible collection of memorabilia, that really fully baked my appetite for it. And with art and memorabilia, to me, you buy pieces that you like. You buy pieces that you want to keep over time, and things that you truly feel passionate about that speak to you. And if you do that, you even if the value doesn't go up as high as you might think it will,
get the satisfaction.
You still have something that you love and something that's on your wall that speaks to you, versus kind of a clean wall of something. So sports to me is not that much different of buying into things that you like, but buying into it with people who you like and appreciate, and who have a shared passion and a shared vision. You and I, when we met that night, a mutual friend introduced us, and we had never met each other before. We were born on two different continents away from it. And when you first started talking about what you were doing, I felt the passion from you and the energy that was inside your heart. Literally, we had never met each other.
Correct.
Both of them on two different continents.
Correct.
But it's something that spoke to me and something that I felt passionate about. I listened to your passion. It touched the passion inside of me. And I was like, wow, let me get to know this brother a little bit better and see if there's some things that we can do with each other. And one thing led to another.
Absolutely.
Here we are in New York City together and have made the decision to be business partners with each other.
Absolutely.
So it is relationships to me, and then you add in the other things to it, and hopefully without any humor whatsoever, I'm looking to be a part of your group and looking to build a championship culture.
Where do you think we are headed as a group of Black people within all that movement? Because you're one of the rare individuals that actually have found a way to find your anchor, your signature in the U.S. You created a bridge to the Caribbean, and then you extended also your bridge to Africa. And I know that the Cape Town Tigers is not your first foray in the continent. What advice would you give to the Black diaspora and to the brothers here about what is pertinent to pay attention to?
So I'll start with the root of it from the perspective of developing your own authenticity within inside yourself, of kind of becoming your own original, of starting with the roots of what makes you your own personal DNA, and learning to celebrate that, learning not to be ashamed of it in any way. So then now challenging yourself, like for me, like reading the autobiography of Malcolm X. Malcolm X went to Egypt. Malcolm X went throughout Africa. And I remember just feeling like the specialness of it. And I never bought into the Tarzan thing of like that Africa was just jungles and stuff. I never bought into that as a child.
And I always tell people, it's always strange that Tarzan will come to Africa. The animals don't talk to the Africans, but they speak to Tarzan.
Right.
The foreigner.
Right. So I never bought into that. I never did. And to me, it was the challenge and the thought of it. And once I got to the Caribbean and I think my first trip to the Bahamas was in 1989, and I saw like a Black prime minister, and I started to kind of like see it. I was 28 years old, and I was like, wow, Black people can run countries. Black people can be in charge of the police force, and you're not targeted because you're Black. And whereas it was the opposite of that, as a young person being raised in the 60s, there were so many things that were kind of convinced against you, or just kind of contriving to be against you. So when I actually started to travel and actually see that, the Caribbean gave me my first opportunity to see that. My first trip to Africa was in 2000 when I went to South Africa. I've been to South Africa about 8 times now. And then I started going to Ghana in around 2002, 2001, 2002. And in South Africa, ended up producing a festival that took place in Durban. And then in Ghana, in Accra and Cape Coast. And that just, like, for me, once I actually got to Africa, and I felt so much more welcome and at home, to help me to live better in the United States, to actually see a lot of the positive things that were going on in Africa to me, which then kind of convinced me for what I had studied in the 80s at Temple University, that it was true, that Black people do live better. Sure, there's poverty everywhere. There's poverty here in the United States. And so there's poverty in Africa. There's poverty in India. I've had the chance now to travel the whole of the world, and you find poverty everywhere. It's not just any one, real location. And poverty's been historic throughout all of history. There's been poverty. So to brand that to Africa or brand that to other third world countries is absolutely positively wrong. So I started to see more, and to me, the Caribbean opened the door for me for Africa. It's been a life-changing experience for me. So for the opportunity to join with you and to be able to start to invest in something that can be ongoing is a blessing to me. Literally, there's a point of pride for me inside of that. So to answer your piece of like the advice part, it would be to kind of open your mind and not just think about things that are here, but being willing to open your mind to be willing to take chances and to invest in other countries, and both from just a purely economical point of view, from real estate that you mentioned, to private equity, to sports, to art, I started collecting Caribbean art in the 90s. I started collecting African art in the 2000s. And so to be willing to take those chances and not constrain yourself to thinking that everything here in the United States is all of what that is, but to really challenge yourself to kind of go beyond it. So my challenge would be for entrepreneurs,
Young people.
men and women, or women and men, from an entrepreneur and other, from an entrepreneur perspective, to think beyond just what you see, and don't limit your thoughts to just what you see, but kind of really close your eyes and see beyond that. Stevie Wonder, I had the honor of working with Stevie in 2012 and produced the United Nations Day with Stevie in 2012. And he said to me one time that, he said, Paxton, I don't see color. Okay, and let that kind of sink in for a minute. It made sense. And, he said, I see the content of people's character. So Dr. King's, made statements kind of along those pieces. And so things reveal themselves. But to me, it's like it's up to the person to kind of close their eyes and really see beyond the circumstances that you're in and challenge yourself to kind of go beyond it. So to be open to build friendships and relationships with someone like yourself who's from a whole different continent, a different country inside that continent, and to be open to that and take those chances, it will open up a world of opportunity for you that you don't necessarily see.
So that ownership point, since you love Malcolm X, made me think of a quote that I think you would appreciate. He said in 1961 in an interview that when you own something, it fulfills you with dignity. When you hope to get a chance to participate in something that someone else owns and expect to have similar right to that owner, that's not dignity. That's ignorance. And it's very important with what you say today to highlight that, because he was saying that in 1961.
Ah, okay.
And people tend to forget the importance of ownership of things that speak to you and that belong to you, or that at least is not part of, it's not you coming into someone else's territory. And you have really demonstrated that you actually have gone to as many territories to find your view, your ownership within different terms.
100% yes on that one. I would be remiss, though, if I didn't mention one of the most critical components of my life, and that is volunteerism. That I learned that from my mother. I certainly learned that from Napoleon Hill, of volunteerism, of the spirit of giving above and beyond yourself and sharing with others the blessings that you've had within your own life. And had I not have volunteered and started doing that at a very young age, I would not have become who I became. And volunteerism has an interesting component to it that most people never even fully grasp. And also donating to charity has the same component to it. There's a special thing when you donate to charity that you convince yourself subconsciously that you have enough to share. And it's a quiet convincing factor within yourself that if I have enough to share, I have more than what I actually need myself. And I can share of my wealth, I can share of my riches, I can share the things that I have. And I don't have to, I'm not like worrying about what enough I have for myself. You convince yourself when you share, you convince yourself when you give, when you're charitable, that you actually have enough. You convince yourself within that action that you actually have enough to share. So, some people might call it tithing or otherwise, but that's a factor.
I will ask one last question.
Okay.
The musician has to play music. The painter has to paint. The artist has to make art. What is that Paxton needs to do to be? If you had to summarize it.
Well, I would certainly say to be myself, like literally for that. And part of my blessing in my life has been I've been able to help musicians. I've literally have produced music around the whole of the world. And more often than not, they manifest as music festivals. So I've produced music festivals around the world, and I've also produced award shows as well. Back in the early 2000s, I helped produce and put together and get distributed the Cora Awards, which were in South Africa for a number of years, which was the African
amazing.
Grammys.
It was amazing.
Right. And that's when I met President Mandela.
Wow.
I met him twice in South Africa and once in the Caribbean. I was able to spend an afternoon with him and a number
amazing
of prime ministers.
An amazing memory. He was the chairman of the fund where I used to work, and we do board meeting. Whether he was briefed or he was naturally solid with memory, he would remember what you guys discussed 12 months back, and it was very strange for a young guy.
Right, to think he had that level of grasp. You think, right.
But he leaves you like with that feeling like, oh, yeah. Wow, I'm special in the meantime.
Right. For sure. I would have never dreamed like some of the things that I've been able to accomplish and some of the people that I've met. In my wildest dreams as a young person, I would have never thought that I would have had the chance to meet, like, President Mandela, to build a meaningful friendship with Harry Belafonte, with Clarence Avant, with I met John Johnson, founder of Jet Magazine, to work with Stevie Wonder, to work with Earth, Wind & Fire, like all of my heroes musically, Dionne Warwick, the Isley Brothers, like to have produced them to present them at concert. So for me, it's like, after a while, after I started to be fortunate enough to do so many different things, I stopped limiting myself into thinking kind of like what could be accomplished and what could be done. And so like that Paxton part, literally just great fortune. And so I've been able to help musicians. I've brought athletes to different parts of the Caribbean, at different parts of the world, to do clinics with young people. And so the musician part, the artist, I've worked with Leroy Clark in Trinidad, Llewellyn Xavier in St. Lucia, different artists, different musicians around the world. And so for me, part of it has been being a kind of a world citizen, a cultural ambassador, and then the entrepreneur.
My brother, this has been outstanding. Do you have any, heart full of feelings, being your brother, being your partner, working with you? I think people like you leave the place only better, and we can only try to all emulate, have you as a model to follow for the youth, and for our two parts of the world, U.S., Africa, to merge better. Any parting question for me?
Well, more so a thank you than a question, and thank you for opening up your heart to give me the opportunity to work with you, and just to let you know how much I appreciate it. You may remember that I said to you that in addition to myself, I wanted to bring my son into the group.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
Literally, and then I plan on spreading the opportunities to those who I've been given to be a part of by way of friends and things like that. So it's more of a thank you.